The stars stretched across the observation window like diamonds scattered on black velvet. Commander Jake Morrison stood with his hands behind his back, watching the massive station that housed the Galactic Council. It was bigger than anything humanity had ever built, a structure that had existed for thousands of years before Earth even discovered fire. Beside him, Lieutenant Patricia Hughes checked her equipment for the third time. She was a combat medic, someone who had seen more battlefield injuries than most doctors saw in their entire careers. Her hands were steady, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. This was bigger than any mission they had ever undertaken. Dr. Henry Cole sat nearby, his nose buried in a data tablet. The xenobiologist had spent the last 5 years studying every species in the Galactic Council, learning their histories, their cultures, their strengths and weaknesses. If anyone could help them understand what they were walking into, it was Henry. The Council had been around for 10,000 years. 47 different species from hundreds of star systems all worked together, sharing technology and knowledge. They had ended wars, cured diseases, and built a civilization that spanned a quarter of the galaxy. When humanity finally developed faster than light travel 30 years ago, Earth had immediately applied for membership. The Council had been polite but skeptical. Humans were newcomers, barely past their own planetary conflicts. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, meaning it was one of the most dangerous planets any species had ever evolved on. Most Council species came from garden worlds with gentle weather and few predators. They looked at humanity with a mixture of curiosity and pity. But protocol was protocol. Every species that wanted to join had to pass the trial. The trial was legendary throughout the galaxy. It was a test of everything a species could offer: physical strength, mental toughness, problem-solving skills, and the ability to work together under terrible pressure. The testing facility was called the Crucible, a planet-sized structure filled with challenges that had broken countless civilizations. The statistics were not encouraging. Only 12% of species passed on their first attempt. 63% failed completely and gave up. 25% suffered so many casualties that they withdrew their applications and never came back. Some species had been trying to pass for generations. The door to their quarters opened with a soft hiss. A holographic figure appeared, shimmering in the air. It was Speaker Vrelnax, the head of the Galactic Council. The being looked like it was made of living crystal, its body reflecting light in rainbow patterns. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Humans of Earth," the speaker said, "I come to ensure you understand what awaits you. The trial is not a simple test. It will push you beyond your limits. It will break you down and force you to rebuild yourselves. Many species have lost members in the Crucible. Some have lost their sanity. Are you certain you wish to proceed?" Jake turned to face the hologram. He stood straight, his military bearing clear in every line of his body. "We understand, Speaker. We're ready." The crystalline being seemed to study them for a long moment. Most species begged for more time when they reached this point. They asked for additional training, more information, extra team members. These humans just stood there, calm and confident, like they were about to take a pleasant walk instead of facing potential death. "Very well," Vrelnax said. "You will enter the Crucible at dawn cycle tomorrow. I will be honest with you, Commander Morrison. In my 300 years as Speaker, I have seen many species attempt the trial. I have seen the strongest warriors fall. I have seen the most intelligent minds break. Your planet may have made you tough, but the Crucible was designed to defeat toughness itself." Pat spoke up, her voice steady. "With respect, Speaker, you've never tested a species from a Class 12 death world before, have you?" The hologram flickered slightly. "No," Vrelnax admitted. "Most death world species never survive long enough to develop space travel. Those that do are usually too focused on survival to seek out other civilizations. You are unique in that regard." Henry looked up from his tablet. "We've studied the records you provided. The last species to attempt the trial was the Raxans 3 years ago. They're from a planet with less gravity than Earth and warmer temperatures. They trained for 5 years and still lost 2 team members. Before them, the Yinth Collective spent 7 years preparing and withdrew after losing 30% of their group." "You have done your research," the speaker said, sounding slightly impressed. "That knowledge will serve you well. But knowing about failure and avoiding it are very different things." "We appreciate your concern," Jake said, "but we didn't come here to fail. Earth needs this. Humanity needs to be part of the galactic community. We're ready to prove we deserve it. The hologram began to fade. Then I wish you fortune, humans. May you surprise us all. When the speaker disappeared, the three humans looked at each other. The weight of what they were about to do settled over them like a heavy blanket. Do you think we can actually do this? Pat asked quietly. Henry set down his tablet and removed his glasses, cleaning them with a cloth. It was a nervous habit he had developed years ago. I think we have advantages the Council doesn't understand. Every species they've tested came from worlds where life was relatively easy. They had to train themselves to handle stress and danger. We were born into it. Jake moved to the window again, looking out at the crucible in the distance. It looked like a small moon, covered in scars and burn marks from 10,000 years of testing. Earth tried to kill us every day of our evolution. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, climate changes. We built civilizations in deserts and frozen wastelands. We crossed oceans in wooden boats, not knowing what was on the other side. Human history is just one long story of looking at impossible odds and deciding to try anyway. So you think that's our edge? Pat asked. Being too stubborn to quit? I think it's more than that, Jake said. The Council built this test to find species that could survive. But survival isn't just about being strong or smart. It's about adapting. It's about refusing to give up even when everything says you should. Earth taught us that lesson before we even knew there were other planets out there. Henry nodded slowly. The trial was designed to break species from easy worlds. But we're not from an easy world. We're from Earth. They spent the rest of the evening preparing. Pat organized her medical supplies, making sure she had treatments for every possible injury. Henry reviewed his data one last time, memorizing details about the Crucible's different zones. Jake went through the mission parameters, planning for contingencies and backup plans. None of them slept much that night. Not from fear, but from anticipation. They were about to show the galaxy what humans could do. When dawn cycle came, they suited up in silence. Their gear was functional and simple, nothing fancy. Weapons, survival tools, medical kits, and environmental suits. Everything they needed to face the unknown. As they walked toward the shuttle that would take them to the Crucible, they passed other species in the corridors. Aliens of every shape and size stopped to watch them. Some looked curious. Others looked sympathetic, like they were watching condemned prisoners walking to their execution. One alien, a small fuzzy creature with 6 legs, approached them timidly. "Excuse me," it said in broken human language. "I wanted to say good luck. My species failed the trial twice before we passed. It took us 40 years. I hope you do better." "Thank you," Jake said kindly. "We'll do our best." The shuttle was waiting. They climbed aboard and strapped in. Through the viewport, they could see the Crucible growing larger as they approached. Its surface was marked with countless scars, each one representing a species' struggle. Pat looked at her teammates and grinned. "Ready to make some history?" "Always," Henry replied. Jake watched the Crucible fill their view. "Let's show them what Deathworlders can do." The shuttle docked with a metallic clang that echoed through the cabin. Jake felt his stomach tighten, not from fear but from the same feeling he got before every mission. It was anticipation mixed with focus, the sensation of his mind and body preparing for action. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Cold air rushed into the shuttle, carrying a metallic smell that reminded Jake of old machinery. Beyond the airlock was a corridor that seemed to stretch forever into darkness. The walls were made of some dark metal, scarred and dented from thousands of years of use. Henry checked his scanner and frowned. Oxygen is at 14%. That's lower than most mountains on Earth. Temperature is -5 Celsius. Gravity is reading at 1.2 times Earth standard. Pat adjusted her breathing mask and chuckled. "That's it? I did basic training in Colorado at high altitude. And 1.2 gravity, please. I've carried wounded soldiers in full gear through mud. This will be easy." They stepped into the corridor. Behind them, the airlock sealed shut with a sound of finality. There was no going back now. Above their heads, a holographic display flickered to life. It showed the council chambers where dozens of alien species were watching. Their audience looked like they were observing a funeral rather than a test. An automated voice spoke, emotionless and clear. "Trial participants, humanity. Classification, Deathworld species, Class 12. The trial begins now. The floor disappeared beneath them. Jake felt his stomach drop as he fell into darkness. The corridor had been a trap, and they were plummeting through empty space. Wind screamed past his ears and he couldn't see anything. Couldn't tell how far he was falling or what was waiting below. But his training kicked in immediately. He spread his arms and legs, controlling his descent like a skydiver. He had done high-altitude drops dozens of times. This was just another jump, just another mission. Beside him, he could hear Pat actually laughing as she fell. That woman had no fear, which made her either the best soldier he had ever met or completely insane, possibly both. 30 meters to impact, Henry's voice called out, remarkably calm for someone falling through darkness. 20 meters, 15 meters. A safety net materialized below them, glowing with blue energy. They hit it hard, bouncing twice before rolling onto solid ground. Jake was on his feet immediately, weapon ready, scanning for threats. Pat landed in a crouch beside him, and Henry rolled to his position to complete their defensive triangle. The temperature had changed drastically. What had been -5 degrees in the corridor was now over 40 degrees Celsius. Sweat immediately began to bead on Jake's forehead. The air was thick and humid, like being inside a jungle during the wet season. Then he saw movement in the shadows. The creatures came fast and low, staying just beyond the edge of visibility. They were synthetic, designed by the Council to test combat readiness. But synthetic didn't mean harmless. These things had been programmed to hunt, to kill, to push participants to their absolute limits. The first one lunged from the darkness. It was all teeth and claws, a nightmare made of metal and artificial muscle. Pat's plasma rifle fired twice, precise shots that dropped the creature before it could reach them. Its body twitched on the ground, sparking and leaking hydraulic fluid. "Contact left," Henry called out, firing at shadows that moved too fast to be natural. More creatures poured in from every direction. They worked together, flanking and coordinating like a pack of wolves. Jake fired in controlled bursts, conserving ammunition, making every shot count. Pat covered their right side, her movements smooth and practiced. Henry, despite being a scientist, handled his weapon like someone who had spent time on a firing range. The battle lasted 5 minutes, but it felt like an hour. The creatures kept coming in waves, testing their ammunition, their stamina, their ability to stay calm under pressure. When the last one finally fell, silence dropped over the chamber like a curtain. Jake's heart was pounding, and his hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. "Status report." "I'm good," Pat said, breathing hard but grinning. "Couple of scratches, nothing serious. That was actually fun." "Ammunition at 70%, Henry reported, wiping sweat from his face. "But look at the display." Jake looked up at the holographic screen showing the Council observers. The aliens were leaning forward in their seats. Several were talking rapidly to each other, their universal translators creating a buzz of confused conversation. Speaker Vrelnax's voice echoed through the chamber, and for the first time, there was surprise in those chiming tones. "Remarkable. The Raxons required 3 attempts to clear the entry gauntlet. The Yinth Collective lost 16 members. You completed it in under 6 minutes." Jake allowed himself a small smile. "What's next, Speaker?" There was a pause. Then the automated voice spoke again. "Proceed to Zone 2. Psychological evaluation." The far wall opened, revealing another corridor. This one was lit with a sickly green light that made everything look diseased. Jake didn't like the look of it, but they had no choice. They had to keep moving forward. They walked through the corridor in formation, weapons ready, senses alert. The temperature began to drop again, and the air took on a strange quality that made it hard to breathe properly. Jake felt his skin prickling, some instinct warning him that danger was approaching. The corridor opened into a large chamber. As soon as they stepped inside, doors slammed shut behind them and walls rose from the floor, separating them. Jake found himself alone in a sealed room, cut off from his team. "Pat? Henry?" he called out, but there was no response. Then the images started. The walls became screens showing scenes from Jake's past. Not just any scenes, but the worst moments of his career. He saw the transport ship that had exploded during his first command, killing 17 people. He saw the faces of soldiers who had died following his orders. He saw every mistake, every failure, every decision that had led to tragedy. The images were accompanied by sounds, screams of the dying, explosions, the crackle of flames. Voices whispered in his ears, accusing him, blaming him, telling him that he was responsible for all that death. Jake felt his chest tighten. This was psychological warfare, designed to break his spirit and make him question everything about himself. The council had learned that physical strength meant nothing if the mind shattered first. In the next room, Pat was surrounded by projections of dying patients. People she had tried to save during battles, during disasters, during the countless emergencies that filled a combat medic's career. Their blood was on her hands, literally painted across her vision in vivid red. They begged her for help she couldn't give, cried out in pain she couldn't stop. Her hands began to shake. She had seen so much death, tried so hard to save lives, but it was never enough. There were always more wounded, always more dying, always more failure. In the third room, Henry faced images of Earth destroyed. He saw humanity wiped out, forgotten by the universe, every achievement turned to dust. The projection showed him that nothing he did mattered, that humans were too small and insignificant to make any difference in a galaxy that had existed for billions of years. The psychological assault was brutal and targeted. The council systems had analyzed their personalities, found their deepest fears, and weaponized them. This was the zone where most species failed. Physical pain could be endured, but psychological torture was something else entirely. But then something unexpected happened. Jake stopped trying to look away from the images. Instead, he stood straight and faced them directly. "I know," he said quietly to the projections. "I remember every name, every face. I carry them with me every single day, and I keep going because that's what they would want. That's what honor demands." The images flickered, confused by his response. In her room, Pat closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She remembered what her instructor had told her years ago after a particularly difficult training exercise. You can't save everyone, but you honor those you lose by saving the next one. She opened her eyes, stood up, and started walking forward. The projections were still there, still horrible, but she kept moving anyway. In the third room, Henry started laughing. It began as a small chuckle but grew into genuine laughter that echoed off the walls. "Yes," he said to the projections. "We're small. We're new. We're insignificant in cosmic terms. And we're still here. We're still fighting. That's not meaningless. That's called being human." The walls dissolved. The three of them found themselves back together in a central area. They were breathing hard, eyes slightly wild, but they were unbroken. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Aliens were standing up, arguing, pointing at screens and checking records. This wasn't supposed to happen. The psychological zone had a 98% failure rate for first-time participants. Speaker Vrelnak spoke, and for the first time, the crystalline being sounded truly shocked. How? The Yinth hive mind shattered in that zone. The Raxans needed medical intervention and therapy for cycles. How did you simply walk through it? Jake looked up at the displays where dozens of alien faces stared at them with awe and fear. Because we're human, Speaker. We're born on a world that tries to kill us from day one. We face death and failure and tragedy as part of normal life. Psychological warfare, that's just called existing on Earth. The automated voice gave them no time to rest. Proceed to Zone 3, Environmental Adaptation Testing. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead and checked on his team. Pat was drinking water from her canteen, her hands steady despite what they had just been through. Henry was adjusting his equipment, his face set in determination. They were tired but far from broken. The next corridor was different from the others. The walls were transparent, showing machinery and tubes filled with colored liquids. This was where the crucible would control the environment, creating conditions designed to push their bodies to the breaking point. They entered a massive chamber that looked like it could hold a small city. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into darkness. The floor was flat and featureless, stretching out in all directions. Environmental testing will now begin, the automated voice announced. Prepare for rapid condition changes. The temperature dropped instantly. One moment it was comfortable, the next it was Arctic cold. Jake felt frost forming on his suit as the temperature plummeted to -40 degrees Celsius. His breath came out in clouds of vapor. His fingers started going numb. Heating elements, he ordered through chattering teeth. They activated the emergency heating in their suits, but it barely kept up with the cold. Pat's scanner was beeping warnings about hypothermia risk. Henry's glasses fogged up and he had to wipe them clear every few seconds. Then, just as suddenly, the temperature spiked. The Arctic cold vanished and was replaced by scorching heat. The thermometer climbed past 50 degrees Celsius, then 60, then 70. It felt like standing inside an oven. The heating elements in their suits, still running from the cold, made everything worse. Jake fumbled to shut them off before he cooked inside his own equipment. "This is insane," Pat said. Her voice strained as she tried to regulate her body temperature. "This is Tuesday in Death Valley," Jake replied, remembering training exercises in the California desert. "Keep moving." Movement helps. The atmosphere changed next. The air became thin, oxygen dropping to levels found at the top of Mount Everest. Breathing became difficult, each breath feeling like it brought no air at all. Jake's vision started to blur at the edges. His head felt light and dizzy. They activated their emergency breathing apparatus, small masks that provided concentrated oxygen. But even with the masks, moving was difficult. Every step felt like pushing through mud. Then the pressure increased. The air became thick and heavy, crushing down on them like being deep underwater. Jake felt his ears pop painfully. His chest felt compressed like something was sitting on it. The breathing masks struggled to adapt to the changing pressure. Through it all, they kept moving forward. One foot in front of the other, refusing to stop, refusing to give up. Toxic gas began seeping into the chamber. The scanners went crazy, identifying compounds that would burn their lungs and blind their eyes. They sealed their suits completely, relying entirely on internal air supplies. The gas swirled around them in yellow-green clouds, looking like something from a nightmare. "How long can we survive on suit air?" Henry asked, his voice muffled by his mask. 20 minutes, Pat replied, checking her readouts. "Maybe 30 if we don't exert ourselves." "Then we move fast," Jake said. Gravity suddenly increased. It felt like weights had been attached to every part of their bodies. What had been 1.2 Earth gravity became 2 times normal, then 3 times. Jake's legs nearly buckled under the increased weight. His equipment, which had felt light before, now felt like it weighed hundreds of pounds. They dropped to their hands and knees and started crawling. There was no shame in it, no defeat. It was simple adaptation to the circumstances. Standing was impossible, so they crawled. In the council chambers, the observers watched in stunned silence. Most of them had never experienced even a fraction of these conditions. Their homeworlds were stable, comfortable, safe. The idea of surviving such rapid environmental changes seemed impossible. "They should be dead," one delegate whispered. "The Raxans couldn't handle even half this intensity." "Look at their vitals," another alien said, pointing at medical readouts. "Their heart rates are elevated, but not critically. Their bodies are adapting in real time." Speaker Vrelnax watched the humans crawl through conditions that would kill most species in minutes. The crystalline being was beginning to understand something profound about Deathworld evolution. Gravity decreased suddenly, dropping to 0. The humans found themselves floating, tumbling through the air with no sense of up or down. This was disorienting in a different way. Jake's stomach lurched as his inner ear struggled to cope with weightlessness, but Henry actually laughed. "Remember orbital training," he said. "This is just like the zero-G simulator, except with less vomit," Pat added, though she looked a bit green. They used their momentum to push off surfaces, controlling their movement through the weightless environment. It was awkward and clumsy, but they made progress. The chamber suddenly filled with water, cold, salty water that rushed in from hidden vents. In seconds, they were completely submerged, swimming through liquid while trying to navigate and maintain their bearings. Their suits kept them breathing, but visibility was near 0. Jake felt panic trying to creep in. Drowning was a primal fear for humans, something built into their instincts. But he pushed it down, forced himself to stay calm. They had done water survival training. They knew how to handle this. They linked hands to avoid getting separated and kicked toward what they hoped was the exit. The water was freezing cold, then suddenly boiling hot. Temperature shifts that should have killed them were barely survivable thanks to their environmental suits. The water drained away as quickly as it had appeared. They found themselves on solid ground again, soaking wet, exhausted but still alive. A door opened ahead of them, marking the zone exit. They stumbled through it and collapsed on the other side. For a long moment, they just lay there, breathing hard, every muscle in their bodies aching. Zone 3 complete, the automated voice announced. Time, 18 minutes, 42 seconds. Previous record, 4 hours, 33 minutes. New record established. The council chamber exploded in conversation. Records were being shattered. Every assumption about what species could endure was being challenged. One of the council members, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish, spoke with something like fear in its voice. How is this possible? We designed these tests based on the most extreme conditions found throughout the galaxy. No single species should be able to handle all of them. Vrelnak spoke slowly, understanding dawning. Because Earth has all of them, their planet contains Arctic cold and desert heat. It has high mountains with thin air and deep oceans with crushing pressure. It has toxic environments and rapid climate changes. We thought we were testing them with extreme conditions. We were actually showing them conditions they evolved to handle. Their bodies are incredible, another delegate said, examining the medical data. Look at their cardiovascular systems, their muscles, their ability to regulate temperature. They're built to survive anything. Because they had to be, Vrelnak said quietly. On a Class 12 death world, any weakness means death. Only the most adaptable survived. We're not testing a species that learned to handle extreme conditions. We're testing a species that was forged by them. On the floor of the crucible, Jake slowly sat up. His environmental suit was damaged and smoking. Pat's breathing apparatus had a crack running through it but was still functioning. Henry had lost his glasses somewhere in the water section and was squinting to see properly. One more zone, Jake said, his voice hoarse. We can do one more. Pat groaned but pushed herself to her feet. We've come this far. Not stopping now. Henry found a spare pair of glasses in his pack and put them on. The final zone is supposed to be the worst, the one where everyone fails. Then I guess we'll see what the worst looks like, Jake said. They helped each other up, checked their equipment, and faced the final corridor. Through it lay Zone 4, the test that had ended the dreams of countless species. The automated voice spoke again. Proceed to Zone 4, final examination. Warning, this zone has a 99% failure rate. Casualties are common. Psychological trauma is expected. You may withdraw now without penalty. The three humans looked at each other. They were exhausted, battered, and pushed to their limits. Any sane person would take the offer to withdraw. They had already proven more than any species before them. Jake thought about Earth, waiting for an answer. Humanity watching to see if they could join the galactic community. All the people depending on them to succeed. No, he said firmly. We're finishing this. They walked into the final corridor. Behind them in the council chambers, Speaker Vrelnax felt something the crystalline being had not experienced in centuries. It was a mixture of hope and fear, excitement and dread. These humans were rewriting everything the council thought they knew about strength and survival. The speaker only hoped they would survive what came next. Because Zone 4 was not designed to test physical ability or mental toughness or environmental adaptation, Zone 4 tested something far more fundamental. It tested values, morality, and what a species would sacrifice to survive. It was the zone where the trial revealed not what species could do, but what they would do. And that Vrelnax knew. The final corridor was different from all the others. It was clean and well lit, almost pleasant. The walls were white and smooth, the temperature was comfortable, and the air was fresh. After everything they had been through, it felt wrong. Too easy. Too calm. Jake's instincts were screaming at him that this was a trap. Not a physical trap, but something worse. Something that would test them in ways combat and environmental hazards never could. They entered a circular chamber with 3 doors. Each door was marked with a holographic symbol that glowed softly in the air. Above each door was a display showing information, scenarios playing out like movies. The automated voice spoke, but this time it sounded almost sad. You have reached the final trial. This is not a test of strength or endurance. This is a test of values. Every species must face this choice. Every species must decide what they are willing to sacrifice. Jake approached the first door and read the information displayed above it. His stomach sank as he understood what he was seeing. Dr. 1 showed a simple scenario. If they walked through it, they would pass the trial. Humanity would gain council membership. Earth would join the galactic community with all its benefits. Technology, trade, knowledge, everything humanity had dreamed of. But there was a cost. A small colony of another species, the Torvan, would be left to die in a disaster that the humans could prevent. The scenario showed the Torvan clearly. A peaceful species that looked like walking plants with gentle eyes and soft voices. Door 2 showed a different choice. Save the Torvan colony and prevent the disaster. But doing so would mean failing the trial. Humanity's application would be rejected. Earth would remain isolated from galactic civilization for another century. All the progress, all the hope, all the dreams would die. Dagger 3 showed the most difficult option. Attempt to save both the Torvan and pass the trial. Try to rescue the colony while still completing the mission. But the numbers displayed above the door told a harsh truth. The probability of success was less than 5%. Failure would mean everyone died, including the Torvan. Humanity would be barred from reapplying to the Council for 500 years. Pat read the displays and felt sick. This is the test? Choosing who lives and who dies. Henry's hands were shaking as he checked his tablet. The Torvan colony. It says here there are 200 individuals. 73 of them are children. And they're real? Jake asked, his voice hard. Not simulations or holograms? There was a pause before the automated voice answered. Affirmative. The final trial uses real scenarios to ensure authentic decision-making. The Torvan colony exists. The disaster is real. Your choice will have real consequences. Speaker Vrelnax's voice echoed through the chamber. The crystalline being sounded tired, ancient. This is the test that matters, humans. This is where we learn who you truly are. Every species faces this choice. Every species chooses survival. It is logical. It is rational. It is correct. Sacrifice the few to save the many. Choose door 1. We will think no less of you. We will understand. Jake stared at the doors, his mind racing. He thought about Earth, about the billions of people waiting for news. He thought about the opportunities that council membership would bring. Medicine, technology, peace. So much good could come from joining the galactic community. But he also thought about 200 people, 73 of them children who would die if they chose the easy path. How long has this test existed? He asked. 10,000 years, Vrelnax replied. And in all that time, how many species have chosen door 3? Silence. A long, heavy silence that told Jake everything he needed to know. None. The speaker finally said, It is suicide to try. The odds are impossible. Jake looked at Pat and Henry, his teammates, his friends, people who had followed him through hell without question. What do you think? Pat's jaw was set, her eyes hard with determination. I didn't become a medic to decide who deserves to live and who deserves to die. I save everyone I can. That's the job. Henry took off his glasses and cleaned them, his thinking habit. The Council has been making this choice for 10,000 years. Letting people die to maintain their system. That's not civilization. That's organized cowardice, Jake nodded slowly. A plan was forming in his mind, crazy and desperate, but possible. Maybe. The Council thinks this is about choosing between humanity and the Torvan. They're wrong. This is about choosing what kind of species we want to be. He turned to face the cameras, looking directly at the Council observers. You want to know what makes humans different, Speaker? It's not that we're stronger or tougher. It's that we don't accept impossible odds. We look at 5% chance of success and we see a chance, not a guarantee of failure. You would attempt door 3? Vrelnax sounded shocked. After everything you've accomplished, you would throw it away? We're not throwing anything away, Jake said firmly. We're doing what humans do best. We're finding a way to win when everyone says we can't. They walked toward door 3. The display above it showed the scenario in detail. A space station in orbit around the Torvan homeworld was failing. Structural collapse was imminent. Toxic atmosphere was leaking in. The Torvan people were trapped, unable to evacuate in time. The station would fall from orbit in 90 minutes. Pat was already reviewing medical supplies. I'll need to set up triage. The Torvan physiology is different from ours. I'll have to adapt treatments on the fly. Henry was pulling up schematics on his tablet. The station's life support systems are failing. If I can reroute power and patch the atmospheric processors, I might be able to buy us time. Jake studied the tactical situation. We'll need to stabilize the structure, evacuate the colonists, and do it all before the orbit decays. It's going to be close. The council chamber had erupted in chaos. Delegates were standing, arguing, pointing at screens. Some looked excited, others terrified. This was unprecedented. This broke every rule, every expectation. "They're going to die," one delegate said flatly. "The odds are impossible." "Then why do I feel like we're about to witness something remarkable?" Another whispered. Brelnax watched the humans prepare to enter door 3. The speaker felt something stirring, an emotion that had been buried for so long it was almost forgotten. It was shame. Shame that for 10,000 years the Council had built a system that rewarded choosing the easy path, that celebrated survival at the cost of morality. "Stop," Brelnax said suddenly. The humans paused, hands on the door. "Before you proceed, I must tell you something. If you fail, if you die attempting this, the galaxy will remember you as fools. History will record your deaths as proof that idealism is weakness." Jake smiled, a fierce expression full of determination. "Then I guess we better not fail, Speaker. Because we're about to show the galaxy that idealism backed by action is the strongest force there is." They opened door 3 and stepped through. The chamber dissolved around them, replaced by the interior of a ship. They were suddenly in a transport vessel racing toward the failing Torvin station. Alarms were blaring. Status displays showed critical failures throughout the station. Time was ticking down. Through the viewport, Jake could see the station. It was huge, a spinning wheel design that created artificial gravity. But one entire section was venting atmosphere, torn open by some catastrophic failure. The structure was visibly buckling, metal twisting under stress it was never designed to handle. 90 minutes, Henry said, checking the countdown. "That's not a lot of time." "Then we work fast," Jake replied. "Pat, you're on medical. Get the injured stabilized and ready to move. Henry, you're on life support. Keep the air breathable and the structure from collapsing. I'll handle evacuation and coordinate everything." Their transport docked with the dying station. The airlock opened and they rushed inside. What they found was chaos. The Torvin were scattered throughout the station, some injured, all terrified. They looked at the humans with confusion and hope, these strange aliens who had come to help. One of the Torvin, an elder with leaves that had turned gray with age, approached Jake. "You are from the Council? You have come to save us?" Jake met the elder's eyes. "We're humans, and yes, we're here to save everyone." "Everyone," the elder repeated, not understanding. "But the evacuation ships can only hold half our population. The Council told us to choose who would live and who would die." Jake felt anger flare hot in his chest. The Council had known about this situation and done nothing. They had turned a tragedy into a test, using real lives as props in their evaluation. The Council was wrong. Jake said firmly, "We're not leaving anyone behind." Pat was already working, moving through the injured with practiced efficiency. She adapted her medical techniques on the fly, learning Torvin physiology through trial and error. Her hands were steady, her voice calm, reassuring the frightened colonists that help had arrived. Henry was at the main power station, his fingers flying over alien controls. He had minutes to understand systems that had taken Torvin engineers years to learn, but his xenobiology background gave him insights into how their technology worked. He started rerouting power, redirecting everything non-essential to life support and structural integrity. Jake coordinated the evacuation, using every bit of space on every available ship. He packed people in tighter than safety regulations allowed. He had the Torvin form chains, holding each other. The station groaned like a dying animal. Metal twisted and buckled as structural supports failed one by one. Sparks rained down from damaged power conduits. The air was filled with the sound of alarms and the smell of burning circuits. Jake moved through the chaos with absolute focus. He had divided the Torvin into groups, assigning the healthiest to help move the injured and elderly. Every person had a job, a purpose, a role in their own survival. That was the key to managing disaster. Give people something to do and they stayed calm. Group 3 moved to docking port 7, he called out over the communication system. Group 5, you're clear to proceed to port 9. Stay together and watch your step. A young Torvin, barely more than a child, grabbed Jake's arm with vine-like fingers. My mother is trapped in Section C, the door is jammed. Please, you have to help her. Jake could see Section C on his scanner. It was in the damaged area where atmosphere was venting. The structure there was failing fastest. Going in there was suicide. They had maybe 20 minutes before the whole section collapsed. He should have told the child no. Should have said they couldn't risk it. Should have made the logical choice. Instead, he checked his environmental suit and sealed his helmet. Stay here and help the others. I'll get your mother. The child's eyes, large and golden like flower petals, filled with tears of hope. Jake ran toward Section C, his boots magnetic locking to the floor as he entered the damaged area. The atmosphere was already thin here. His suit's oxygen supply kicked in automatically. Debris floated in the zero gravity, spinning lazily in the vacuum. He found the jammed door and pulled out a plasma cutter. The tool was designed for cutting metal in emergencies. He set it to maximum power and began cutting through the door frame. Metal glowed white-hot and dripped away. The heat was intense even through his suit. The door fell away and he pushed inside. A Torvan woman was huddled in the corner, her breathing shallow. Her leaves were wilting from lack of oxygen. She looked at Jake with fading awareness. "I've got you," Jake said, lifting her carefully. Torvan were lighter than humans, their plant-based biology less dense. He carried her back through the damaged section, dodging floating debris, jumping gaps where the floor had fallen away. He made it back to the main section with 5 minutes to spare. The young Torvan cried out in relief and rushed to help its mother. Pat was already there, administering oxygen and checking vitals. "She'll be okay," Pat assured the child. "Your mother is strong." In the power station, Henry was performing miracles with alien technology. He had managed to stabilize the critical systems, but keeping them running required constant adjustment. His fingers flew over the controls, redirecting power microseconds before failures occurred. But he was running out of options. The station's power core was failing. In 10 minutes, everything would go dark. Life support would fail. The remaining structural supports would collapse. "Jake," Henry called over the communication channel. "I need more time. The power core is dying. How much time?" 10 minutes. Maybe 15 if I can manually override some of the safety systems. Jake checked his scanner. They still had 47 Torvan to evacuate. At current rate, they needed 12 minutes minimum. They were going to be 3 minutes short. He pulled up the station schematics and studied them frantically. There had to be something, some option they hadn't considered. His mind raced through possibilities, discarding impossible plans, searching for anything that might work. Then he saw it. The station had emergency power cells scattered throughout for backup systems. They were small, not designed to run major systems, but if he could link them together, bypass the main core entirely, create a temporary network, it was insane. The power cells weren't meant to be connected that way. The energy flow could overload and explode, but it might buy them the minutes they needed. "Henry, I'm sending you new schematics. Tell me if this could work." There was a pause as Henry studied the plan. When he spoke, his voice was tight. "Jake, this is crazy. The power cells could explode. You'd be right next to them. Will it work?" Another pause. "Yes, maybe, probably, if everything goes perfectly." "Good enough. I'm doing it." Jake ran through the station, locating the emergency power cells. They were housed in small compartments throughout the structure. He started connecting them manually, running cables and bypassing safety systems. His hands worked fast, muscle memory from years of field repairs taking over. Pat's voice came over the channel. "Jake, what are you doing? Your vital signs are spiking." "Buying us time," he replied, connecting another cell. The makeshift network was growing, power flowing through improvised connections that no engineer would ever approve. The first cell started overheating. Warning lights flashed red. Jake ignored them and kept working. In the council chambers, the observers watched in horror and fascination. What the human was doing was technically brilliant and completely insane. The risk of catastrophic failure was nearly 100%. "He's going to kill himself," one delegate said. "No," Vrelnax replied quietly. "He's going to save them all." Henry integrated the emergency power network into the main systems. Power surged through the station, bypassing the failing core. Lights flickered back on. Life support stabilized. The structural support stopped their terminal groaning. "It's working," Henry breathed in disbelief. "It's actually working." Jake finished the last connection and ran back toward the evacuation zones. His suit was registering dangerous heat levels from being so close to the overloading power cells. But he was alive, and the station had power. The evacuation continued. Group by group, the Torvan were loaded onto ships. Pat worked without stopping, treating injuries, calming fears, checking every person before they boarded. Henry maintained the power network, adjusting flows, preventing cascading failures. "Last group," Jake called out. Everyone moved to docking port 4. Nice and calm. "We're getting everyone home. The final Torvin boarded the evacuation ships. Jake did a last sweep of the station, checking every compartment, every room, making absolutely certain no one was left behind. "Station clear," he reported. "Everyone's off." "Then we need to leave now," Henry said urgently. "The power cells are failing. We have maybe 2 minutes before they explode." They ran for their transport ship. Behind them, the station was dying. The makeshift power network had bought them the time they needed, but it was at its limit. Red warning lights flashed throughout the structure. They reached their ship and sealed the airlock. The transport undocked and pulled away, thrusters firing at maximum. Through the viewport, they watched the station. The power cells exploded in a chain reaction. The station broke apart in a massive burst of light and debris. The structure they had fought so hard to save was destroyed, but every person who had been aboard was safe. 200 Torvin lives rescued from certain death. Jake collapsed into a seat, his entire body shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. Pat fell beside him, her medical kit empty, her hands stained with Torvin sap that served as their blood. Henry leaned against a wall, his glasses fogged with condensation, looking like he might pass out. They had done it. Against impossible odds, with a 5% chance of success, they had saved everyone. The transport returned to the Crucible's main facility. When the airlock opened, they found themselves facing an honor guard of council members. Dozens of species lined the corridor, standing in respectful silence. Speaker Vrelnak stood at the front, the crystalline being's form glowing with colors they had never seen before. "In 10,000 years of the trial," the speaker said, voice resonating through the corridor, "no species has ever chosen door 3. No species has ever attempted to save both themselves and others. No species has ever succeeded in the impossible." Jake stood straighter despite his exhaustion. "With respect, Speaker, it was only impossible until someone tried." "You are correct," Vrelnak said. "And you have taught us a lesson we desperately needed to learn. We built this test to find species that could survive. But survival alone is not enough. You showed us that true strength is using your ability to survive to protect those who cannot." The council members began to applaud. It started slowly, then built into a thunderous ovation. Species that had never shown emotion were moved by what they had witnessed. An older delegate, one who looked like a floating crystal formation, approached them. "I was on the council when we designed the final trial. We created it to test logic and rational decision-making. We believed that choosing certain survival over risky heroism was the mark of wisdom. You were wrong," Jake said simply. "Yes," the delegate agreed. "We were wrong. We created a test that justified our own failures. For 10,000 years, we have let situations like the Torvin colony happen, because it was easier than risking ourselves. You humans from your deadly world reminded us what we should have been all along." Pat spoke up, her voice tired but firm. "Those people didn't need to be in danger at all. The council knew about their situation and used it as a test. That's not acceptable." "That's cruel." Another wave of shame passed through the assembled council members. They had grown so comfortable with their system that they had forgotten to question it. "You are right," Vrelnak said. "The trial is ended. It will never be used again. We will find a better way to evaluate species, one that does not require suffering and sacrifice." 6 months had passed since the trial. 6 months since 3 humans had done the impossible and changed the galaxy forever. Life on Earth had returned to something resembling normal, but everything was different now. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They were part of something vast and ancient and wonderful. Jake Morrison stood in the new Council Embassy building in New York City, looking out at the skyline. The building was a marvel of combined human and alien technology, a symbol of cooperation between species. Ships from dozens of worlds came and went from the landing pads on the roof, bringing diplomats and traders and scientists eager to work with humanity. His uniform was different now. He wore the insignia of a council representative, a position created specifically for Earth. His job was to serve as a bridge between humanity and the other species, helping both sides understand each other. It was harder than fighting through the Crucible had been in some ways. Cultural misunderstandings happened daily. Species that had never experienced war struggled to understand human military structure. Humans found it difficult to relate to beings that communicated through color changes or chemical signals. But they were making progress, learning from each other, building something new. A door opened behind him and Pat walked in. She wore the uniform of the new Interspecies Medical Corps, an organization she had helped create. The Corps trained doctors and medics from all species to treat patients regardless of their biology. It was revolutionary work, combining medical knowledge from dozens of worlds. "You ready for the ceremony?" Pat asked, adjusting her dress uniform. "It starts in an hour." "As ready as I'll ever be," Jake replied. "I still don't understand why they're making such a big deal about this." "Because what we did mattered," Pat said simply. "We didn't just pass a test. We changed how the entire galaxy thinks about strength and heroism. That deserves recognition." The ceremony was being held at the Council's central station, a massive structure that served as the governmental heart of galactic civilization. Representatives from all 47 member species would be there. The 3 humans were being formally honored for their actions during the trial. Henry arrived a few minutes later, looking uncomfortable in his formal attire. The xenobiologist had been offered a dozen prestigious positions at universities and research facilities throughout the galaxy. He had turned them all down to lead a new program studying Deathworld species and their unique adaptations. "Did you hear about the latest applicants?" Henry asked, pulling up information on his tablet. 3 more species have applied for council membership in the last month, all from high-gravity or extreme environment worlds. "Let me guess," Jake said. "They heard about what we did and decided to try." "Exactly. They're calling it the Deathworld Renaissance. Species that were told they were too primitive or too dangerous are now being reevaluated. The council is actually sending aid to help them develop instead of just testing them to destruction." Pat smiled. "So we really did change things." "More than we know," Henry said. "I've been corresponding with scientists from species that failed the trial years ago. They're grateful we ended it. Some of them are still dealing with trauma from the experience, the Raxons especially. Losing 2 team members broke something in their society. They've been cautious and afraid ever since." "Maybe we can help them," Jake suggested. "Show them that failure doesn't define you. What you do after failure is what matters." They took a shuttle to the council station. The trip through space was routine now, something that would have been impossible just a year ago. Through the viewport, they could see Earth hanging in the void, beautiful and blue and deadly. Their home, the planet that had forged them into what they were. The council station was magnificent. It had been built over thousands of years, with each member species adding their own architectural styles. The result was a structure that looked like organized chaos, a celebration of diversity and cooperation. They were escorted to a massive ceremonial chamber. Thousands of beings filled the space, representatives from every corner of galactic civilization. At the center stood Speaker Vrelnax, the crystalline being's form glowing with ceremonial colors. "We gather today," Vrelnax's voice resonated through the chamber, "to honor 3 individuals who showed us the true meaning of courage." Jake Morrison, Patricia Hughes, and Henry Cole faced the trial that had stood for 10,000 years. They faced challenges that had broken countless species, and they succeeded not through strength alone, but through their refusal to accept that some lives were worth less than others. The speaker gestured, and holographic displays showed footage from the trial. The audience watched the humans fight through the combat zone, endure the psychological warfare, survive the environmental extremes. They saw the moment when Jake, Pat, and Henry chose Door 3, the impossible option that no species had ever attempted. They saw the desperate race to save the Torvan colony, the creative problem-solving, the stubborn determination, the willingness to risk everything to save people they had never met. When the footage ended, the chamber was silent. Then slowly, every being present stood and applauded. The sound was overwhelming, thousands of hands, claws, tentacles, and other appendages creating a wave of appreciation. But their greatest achievement, Vrelnax continued when the applause died down, was showing us our own failures. We had created a system that rewarded cowardice and called it wisdom. We had forgotten that civilization is not about survival at any cost. It is about using our strength to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The speaker approached the 3 humans. In the crystalline being's hands was a symbol, a representation of unity that incorporated design elements from all council species. "Jake Morrison, Patricia Hughes, Henry Cole, I present you with the Star of Valor, the highest honor the council can bestow. You are the first to receive it, and you have set a standard that will be remembered for millennia." They accepted the awards, feeling the weight of what they represented. Not just recognition for what they had done, but a promise of what galactic civilization could become. After the ceremony, they mingled with representatives from various species. Many wanted to thank them personally, to share how the humans' actions had inspired changes in their own worlds. The Torvan elder who Jake had met was there, looking healthier than before. The being approached with slow dignity. "I wanted to thank you again," the elder said. "Our children are growing strong. They learn about the humans who refuse to leave anyone behind. You have become legends in our culture." "We just did what was right," Jake said. "That is why you are legends," the elder replied. "Because you saw doing what was right as obvious. Not heroic, not special, just necessary. That perspective is what we needed to see." A Raxan delegate approached nervously. The species was tall and thin, adapted to lower gravity with iridescent scales that changed color with their emotions. Their scales showed patterns of shame and regret. "I was one of the survivors of our trial attempt," the Raxan said quietly. "I watched my friends die because we were not strong enough. I have carried that guilt for 3 years." Pat put a gentle hand on the Raxan's arm. "It wasn't your fault. The trial was designed to be nearly impossible. The council set you up to fail and then blamed you for failing. But you succeeded where we failed." "We got lucky," Pat said. "And we had advantages from growing up on a death world. But that doesn't make your attempt any less brave. You tried. You fought. You survived. That takes courage." The Raxan's scale shifted to show gratitude. "Thank you. Your words mean more than you know." Henry was surrounded by scientists, all eager to discuss Deathworld evolution and adaptation. They had questions about Earth's environment, about how humans had developed such incredible endurance and problem-solving abilities. "It's simple, really," Henry explained. "Earth didn't give us a choice. Adapt or die. Every generation, the ones who survived were the ones who could think faster, endure more, and refuse to give up. We're the product of 4 billion years of the universe's toughest training program." A young scientist from a water-based species asked, "But how do you maintain that drive now that you have technology? How do you keep from becoming soft?" Henry smiled. "We remember where we came from. We teach our children about the struggles our ancestors faced. We challenge ourselves constantly, always pushing boundaries. That's the Deathworld mindset. You never settle for comfortable when you can reach for better." As the reception continued, Jake found himself talking with Speaker Vrelnax privately. The crystalline being's colors showed contemplation and respect. "I have been thinking about your species," Vrelnax said, "about what makes humans unique. I believe I understand now. You are optimists in a universe that teaches pessimism." Jake considered that.
Maybe. Or maybe we just can't afford to be pessimistic.
"On a world like Earth, giving up means dying. So we learn to see possibilities instead of obstacles. It is a valuable trait," the speaker said, "one that the council needs. We have become cautious over the millennia. Risk-averse. We maintain what we have rather than reaching for what we could achieve. Your presence will challenge us, push us to be better." "That's what we do best," Jake said with a smile. "Challenge impossible odds." The evening concluded with announcements of new initiatives inspired by